So if the UFC is looking for a tagline, I'll throw this one out there for free for this fight. So it goes a little something like this. Former millionaire prize winner takes on notable zombie. And that is what it is. I mean, Marcin Prachnio coming in here. If you told me he'd be on a 2-fight win streak like 2 or 3 years ago, I wouldn't believe you. I would not believe you one bit.
Where, in Bellator?
And if you told me Philipe Lins was on a 2-fight losing streak after winning 4 fights in a row by finish to win the PFL's inaugural season at heavyweight for $1 million, I would have said, wait, are you kidding me? And Andrei Arlovsky's one of those losses? But listen, that's where we're at right now, coming up this weekend. And for Philipe Lins, he took that fight against Arlovsky. They're training partners. They have trained together extensively. Both American top team guys, still American top team guys. Lins loses that fight by decision. So then what does he do? A couple months later, not even, takes a fight against Tanner Boser. Gets promptly knocked out. That was 1 year and 8 months ago. Philipe Lins, like, I see him. He's been at the PFL Challenger Series. I see him in the cage there on his Instagram wearing a suit with a blurry photo, so that's kind of fun. But for him, it's odd. And the craziest part about it is, if you look at Philipe Lins' overall Tapology page, there's 6 fights that have fallen out for him since 2020. Don'Tale Mays, Ben Rothwell. It's like Sunday, but Ben Rothwell. Ovin St. Preux, and then Azamat Murzakanov back in December. Lins withdrawing from quite a few of those bookings. So ultimately, he gets the Polish striker, Marcin Prachnio, a guy who is a black belt in karate, and you will see it. And it's an interesting matchup because for Philipe Lins, you look at it, primarily a boxer at heavyweight. Now, I understand everybody's going to say, but Craig, he's not really a heavyweight. No, you're right. By and large, light heavyweight. You look at his last 2 fights with Bellator. Well, he lost those, but I mean, Vadim Nemkov was the last loss.
If I'm being completely honest, I thought physically he did match up with the heavyweights he was in there with the UFC against. Like, I didn't think Arlovsky was that much bigger than him, and the same thing with Boser too. Like, I didn't feel like, okay, Lins lost those fights because he's the smaller guy.
Just those 2 guys, I mean, yeah, Tanner Boser is one of those, like 240 type of guys, and Andrei Arlovsky's not the biggest heavyweight. So for Lins, his last fight out, 234. Taking on Prachnio, and listen, credit where it's due. This guy zombied around when he fought Sam Alvey, walked across the cage with his hands down and got hit by a hook and knocked out.
Groceries.
Put on a big-time poster. Then he loses to Magomed Ankalaev, future champ, so that's all right.
I don't think he's future champ, but okay.
Then he got knocked out by Slow Mike Rodriguez. So now we go Alvey, Ankalaev, and Mike Rodriguez. And then you look at the wins. He beats Khalil Roundtree and he beats Ike Villanueva. And this is the weirdest part about it, because on this card coming up this weekend, there's a lot of commonalities. There's a lot of people that have fought each other, like Ike Villanueva's there, Marcin Prachnio's there.
Would Jada Pinkett-Smith call it an entanglement, perhaps?
I'm not sure where you're going with that.
You don't remember that?
I
that
don't
was the meme?
I don't know memes.
Come on, Craig.
But I do know that Marcin Prachnio, that karate black belt, that speed mixed with power is what got him to the dance before he was in the UFC with 1 championship, knocking guys senseless. So it was one of those ones where he lost the fights. He took a long time off between the Ankalaev fight and the fight against Slow Mike Rodriguez. And then from Slow Mike to Khalil Roundtree, only took 5 months off. And since then, now I know, when Roundtree was actually doing things and landing with power, he was giving Prachnio problems. But when Prachnio was able to bring in that speed and the volume, he did a pretty good job in that fight. And then against Ike Villanueva, oh, he won a performance bonus for that one. So,
and we'll talk more about Hurricane Ike later, but that's not the, la creme de la creme of a win.
But realistically, you have 2 guys trending in opposite directions, and for Philipe Lins, I don't know what to expect this weekend.
I at least like this matchup stylistically for him, because the weird thing for Lins is that the 2 last guys who he's fought at heavyweight, they're kind of movement-based fighters. And I know that's a weird thing to say for heavyweights, but Andrei Arlovsky and even Tanner Boser, I'd say they're 2 of the more elusive guys at the weight class. And for Lins, it was weird. He was much more aggressive back in the PFL, and it just seems like he can't get out of that first gear here in the UFC. It is odd, because normally when you have someone who is a boxer, who relies on their footwork a lot, they're a very active fighter from the second they go until the fight's over. But against his last 2 opponents, I don't know if it has been their footwork, if it's just been their upticks in volume. He's never really been able to settle into the fight, which has really been interesting to see, because that is not the fighter who fought in the PFL. And normally, okay, you have 1 fight, octagon jitters, that's fine. 2 fights, though, fighting like this, I'm worried if he is just a little bit past his prime, because that's the thing about Lins. I know we get a lot of prospects who come into the UFC who are in their 30s. Lins isn't like all of them, though. Like you said, coming over from PFL is different than someone who's coming up from, like, LFA in their 30s. Like, he was in a major organization, he had a lot of success in that major organization, and a lot of people, myself included, thought that it would transfer over to the UFC. Now, this fight against Prachnio, it should bring a little bit more aggressiveness out of him because if Prachnio's anything, it's a guy who will be there to be hit. And that's sort of the weird thing about Prachnio too, and why it will be very surprising for me if he is able to get on a 3-fight winning streak, because those first 3 fights in the UFC were awful. And yes, he does strike like a karate striker, but he doesn't have the footwork to go along with it. And that really is frustrating because when guys get into that boxing range, which is what Philipe Lins can do, they really can damage Prachnio. And he has a decent L-step to get out of range initially, but he's not great at keeping guys off of him for a very long period of time unless they get really tired as the fight goes on. Because, for instance, the Khalil Roundtree fight, Khalil's beating the brakes off until like minute 6. And then once Khalil starts to get tired and he's not able to get to him and land those power shots, that's when Prachnio is able to pitter-patter his way to a win. But that was a very, very close fight. And for Prachnio, the win over Ike Villanueva, I know we're going to talk about Ike Villanueva. I don't want to bury the lead just
He's
yet.
also on this card.
He is also on this card. He's 16-13 though, and he hasn't looked great in a very long time. So that win for Prachnio, I don't put a ton of stock into. I just think this is one of those do or die fights for both guys, even though I do agree with you. They are trending in opposite directions, but I still feel like Prachnio needs this win just as bad as Lins does.
Old 18-13 Ike Villanueva. But yeah, when you look at this fight, the thing for me when I was watching the tape on Marcin Prachnio, it's not even that it's an L step, but he does do something like that. It's more of a C. Because he kind of like tucks all the way around and it takes a little bit more time. And then he keeps his head kind of like right here where it's very easy to hit him when he's doing it. So listen, many have tried. Some have been successful. And many have been successful in the UFC. 2-5 for Prachnio. The odds on this one, Prachnio open to -150. -128 right now in best fight odds. For Lins open to +130. +104. So it's coming together. So that community would say on Philipe Lins. If we have a look over on Tapology, surprise to us it is to you. I'm eager to see this one. I'm going to say over under 65% Prachnio.
I'll say under.
I'm going to say under. It's over 442 total votes, 83% Prachnio, 52% by decision, 42% by knockout for the 17% that have Lins, 42% by decision, 50% by knockout. For Philipe Lins, I have to say this. When he won the $1 million at the PFL, that was 2018. He missed all of 2019 due to injury, and then he came back, made the UFC debut in 2020. So he didn't get the sniff at the million the second time through. They booked him late in the season against Satoshi Ishii, Olympian, and that fight didn't happen. The wins that he had, Alex Nicholson, giant man, Jared Rosholt, one of the better wrestlers.
Don't come at me with Jared Rosholt.
One of the better pure wrestlers that you're going to find at heavyweight. Caio Alencar, who can kind of get it done every way, also got submitted by guillotine in the first minute of that fight. And Josh Copeland, who's just tough and a striker. And he was able to beat him in the 4th round of that fight. So, an interesting one if you do look at it for Philipe Lins. He can get it done in a lot of different ways. Hasn't got it done in a long ways. So, for me, Matt, it's the speed, it's the volume of Prachnio. I'm eager to see what Lins looks like here at light heavyweight, though.
I have zero confidence in Prachnio whatsoever to win a fight at the UFC level because I don't think he's very durable and I think he's very hittable. That's not a combination I love in my fighters, but I like how you left it off. I do worry about Philipe Lins at 205. Not that I haven't seen him make the weight before, but it's been years since he has had to make this weight class.
And now he's 36.
Exactly. So even with Jakar close, I know he looked really good over the weekend, but he did miss weight. And for some guys, the time off, it's just been a long time since they had. I know he was able to make weight after, but he had initially weighed in above 156 pounds. And for a lot of fighters who are coming off a long layoff, it's not that they can't make the weight, they just haven't done it in a really long time. It's a very complicated process, so there can be a hiccup here or there. So let's say Philipe Lins isn't 100% of himself going into this fight because the weight cut was a little bit tougher for him. Then I definitely like Prachnio more than I already do, so I agree with you. I got Prachnio.
Big time opportunity in the return for Philipe Lins. He's been off for a time. Taking on Marcin Prachnio, both of us going reluctantly with the Polish fighter. Prachnio to get the win. Let us know in the comments section below who you have in this fight because the fans are going one way, the odds are going another way. It should be a big time one. And coming up on this card, Tanner Boser taking on Alexandr Romanov. Clay Guida taking on Claudio Puelles. And in the main event, Amanda Lemos, Jessica Andrade. Not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.